Hi Brian, hi Marco.
Hey Pascal. Hey Brian.
Hey Marco, hey Pascal.
How are you doing today?
It's all good. And you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Plenty of things to do before the conference. And if you're coming,
Not this year. Yeah.
not this year, too far away, where are you based?
No, I'm based in France, so it's not that far. It's just too
Just
late to
fun.
organize, too many things to take care of before October. I'll be at Devox though, so for the Java conference.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna come, but there was some personal things with my young kid, so I won't be able to. But yeah, you'll be yeah.
Let's see. Let's see. Okay, let's give Ali a few more minutes and then we can kick this off. Mario, do you mind adding yourself to the agenda quickly so that we have that on the log as well? Can send you the link. Okay.
Yeah, I did. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the link.
Yes. Do the merge. Fantastic. Okay. Then let's start. Mm. This is what I want. Okay. So hello everyone. Welcome to the OTel work group of August. Let me move this over a bit. There we go. Okay. So in the beginning, as usual, I have to inform you that by being here, you agree to the membership agreement, the participation and contribution guidelines, and the code of conduct of the Graphical Foundation, which you can find links here, and also that these meetings are going to be published and to YouTube, and we may use LLM and other AI summary tools to summarize the notes. If people want to take notes, they can. There's a Google link as well, where we can type down a few things. Otherwise, we'll just rely on AI to do the job. Right. Cool. Then we have the review of the agenda. So unless you guys have something else to add, there will just be these three topics. And oh, I forgot introduction of the attendees. Hi, I'm Pascal. Ali is not here, so Brian, I think it's your first time here, so maybe expand a little bit on where you're from and what you're doing and what your motivation is and so on.
Sure. So my name is Brian. I've been working in the Spring team for almost a dozen years at this point. Spring is a very popular Java framework in the Java enterprise world. And 2 or 3 years ago, we started Spring for GraphQL, a project that we started working on with the GraphQL Java team because at the time they were working on various Spring integrations, and we agreed that it would be better to work together. I'm still working closely with the GraphQL Java team, but at this point, the overall project and arrangement works quite well. So we're probably one of the most popular GraphQL stack in the Java world. And we even joined recently, as of a year ago or so, we joined forces with the DGS team from Netflix because they rebased part of their stack on top of Spring GraphQL. I'm joining this work group because we do have observability instrumentation all over the Spring portfolio at this point, all the Spring projects. And quite early, I added observability instrumentation in Spring GraphQL, and I'm very much interested in collaborating here to get something that would work as well for GraphQL Java-based and Java-based apps in general. So yeah, I've watched a few recordings already. I've seen the current work that is being done, and I'm pretty close to it's possible for me to take what's done already in YAML format and try it out without much investment on my side for existing observations, just changing some things in my implementation with a new convention. So I can try and see in a real world how that would look into a trace and so on, and how would that work for our framework. So I'm here to help and also see where we can take things.
Awesome. Fantastic. Very glad you were on board. And
Cool.
then the last one today is Marco.
Hi, Marco. I am working on Datadog. I guess similar as everyone here, just trying to make sure that we can generate good data for OTel. Uh, yeah, I'm happy that we're working on this side in the semantics. I'm excited for that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Nice.
Fantastic. Cool. So that concludes the introduction. This we have already done. So there is a mystical Google Sheets, which doesn't have much more information than what's in the pull request at the moment. The only thing that I didn't port from the Google Sheets is what we do with errors. If you have some time today, maybe we can talk quickly about this. But I will probably reach out to Trask by email and ask him. So Trask is a person which joined from the OTel team and the Semantic Conventions team, and I will reach out to him about the errors, and we probably have to ask a few questions there first.
Yeah, regarding errors, Pascal, like we're actually doing stuff with GraphQL errors at Datadog, and like everything is still proprietary attributes. But I'm happy to chime in and talk about it because we try a few iterations to see what actually work with production and customers and with the spec.
Yeah, the only thing which I worry about is what he mentioned about the log, the log events, which is going to be a big change in OpenTelemetry. So you no longer report with events on traces, but you actually use logging. So the only thing or what would be nice is if he could give us already, like if we write the spec already for the new format instead of defining the attributes for the events. And then we can see with him how we want to specify it. But yeah, I mean, let's go through the PRs quickly. There's three. One is for the just initial, very basic traces which all graphical servers can use, and the main trace that's the registry, sorry, but we can go through the registry first. So we have an attribute. It's called the graphical operation name. I don't know, have you read the specification? I know that you did a review, Marco. Did you read through the pull request as well, Ryan?
Yeah, I had a look already. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. Well, then we don't really have to go too much into detail.
Yeah.
Generally, I agree here, Marco, that the query is wrong. It's operation document that's more correct. Then we have the hash, which at the moment is prefixed with the hash identifier. That's more or less convention in graphical by now. And we also have the operation ID, which is just a string. That's more or less just arbitrarily something which this is a hash or identifier of the document provided by the user to identify persistent operations. So that can be anything, right? The hash of the document and the ID is not necessarily the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, well, one thing, Pascal, about just about persistent operations in general throughout a team, throughout these pull requests is I know persistent operation is not part of the original spec, right? It's something that's done in practice to make things just work better for everyone. Um, so the way it is right now, for example, in this specific field, the field name is pretty much like this is like the GraphQL operation ID, and like it's not persistent operation ID, right? Or like something namespace. It's like this is the canonical operation ID, even though we're talking in the context of persistent operations. Like I don't have that much experience with persistent operations, but
Oh, persistent
we
operation. You essentially you can look at the persistent operation like this. When you do client development in GraphQL, you have access to the full SDL and to everything which the schema provides. And you can use this in your React client, and you can just use everything there. And usually development is just open for everyone, and you can just execute all the queries. Now, the trick is when you ship to production, you don't, it's actually work better for everyone. I disagree a bit with this statement because it's actually a security feature. The idea of persistent operations is that once you ship your app to production, you essentially export all of the queries which are in the document in your application. You hash them and you upload them into one of the client registries that you have. And the client registry then maps the hash of the document with the content of the document. And from this point on, the client doesn't need to send the document anymore. It just sends the ID, the hash, or whatever, the MD5 hash of the document. And this is then used to look up on the backend the query string. And it's about security. You know, we can argue about like you can pre-warn these queries, you have less transport and yada yada yada. But after all, the main reason why people should use persistent queries, or why most APIs should use persistent operations, because it's a security feature. It's the easiest way to make your service secure. And it's just an ID. So you just send the ID. It's just this.
Yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense. Like I'm aware of the like how it works and how to implement it. All I'm asking about here is like your fields make sense, the semantic makes sense. Is when we call this graphical operation ID, it sounds like it's like a canonical identification just in general for the query. Even though this only applies to persistent queries, like as is saying this is like do you think it's unnecessary to call this persisted ID instead of just ID, or you think ID is like good enough and like it's not actually collaborating the top level namespace of ID for the future? That's what I'm asking. Yeah.
I have to check, but I'm pretty sure that in the HTTP graphical over HTTP specification, so it's specified, right? So you have the ID, you have the body, and you have the ID, you have the query, you have the variables, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that they talk about operation ID and they specified that the ID in this request is called so it's very, very specific that this probably, it could be the graphical document ID. That's something that we can argue about. But this ID is quite well known in the ecosystem. So it should be named ID.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to catch in general. But yeah, that's good. Yeah, well, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we do have a few other things to discuss. Here we have two possible options of format, how we format the graphical selection path. I think we pretty much settled on this approach last time. We don't, like most people were a bit, they don't really care which format it is unless it's specified. I think this has some advantage. The JSON path has some advantage of being easier to query in certain telemetry systems, but we just have to choose one. I don't know. Mark, you said you team JSON path, right?
Yeah. Just based on like I know it's not by the spec because the spec just gives you raw integer strings, but it looks to me like JSON path would look clearer to someone inspecting. Like it's kind of clear it goes into a payload that's normally JSON. That like I wouldn't oppose if we go with that. Yeah.
We would have the option to use an array of any value, but that's really terrible to
Like
search in
any
most
oh yeah,
telemetry.
like the generic any value. Yeah.
So we could use an array of any in the new OTel specification. I don't know. Do you have any opinions on this, Brian?
I think that JSON path like would work basically. I mean, I don't mind the other format, but I know that on the testing side, when people are performing assertions, they're already familiar with JSON path in the context of GraphQL. So if it helps with better search and better matching, I think it's a good trade-off.
JSON
Yeah.
path.
It seems to me, Pascal, if we want to go for exporting all the fields into their raw, maybe it's something for after we collect feedback, feedback, and this is being out for a while. Yeah.
Yeah, usually with these specifications, there's no feedback until the point that you merge it and people start implementing it, and then there's a ton of feedback. Um,
As usual.
It's all development, right? Like stability, so it's all good.
yeah. Yeah, let's use this one. That's fine. Then we have selection field name. We have the parent and so on. Okay, now interesting bits, these bands. Yeah, so that's not a thing. That's very specific. Like that's a very strong argument for using graphical server operation is that I've discussed it with a few fellow TSCs, and they even thought like even server is a bit questionable in this case, because a graphical server processes operations. There is no requests. It doesn't necessarily need to be a server. It can be whatever. That's also what Benji mentioned in his comment on the pull request is like it could just be graphical operation and we would be fine. Though the reason why I specifically chose graphical.server operation is to keep us the option to have graphical.client operation, which then which would be very aligned with how, for example, the RPC frameworks, the RPC conventions are, where you have the server and the client. There would also be something to discuss, could be graphical.service.operation, but I have the feeling, that's another question for Trask. I have the feeling that there's enough prior art to actually say client and server makes sense, even though that technically a graphical executor doesn't necessarily need to run on the server, but in most cases it does.
Yeah, I think client service makes a lot of sense. Like I don't see an argument against that. The only reason I brought up request is that when I was reading through the graphical spec this week for other reasons, and they mention they actually use the term request, a GraphQL request, when they're talking about the whole process of type checking, not just the query execution, but the stuff that happens before query execution as well,
Mhm.
after. They actually call the whole thing a request as per spec. That's the only reason I bring this up. But like if no one understands what that means, everyone calls this operation. We have to be
So the
practical.
discussion, the discussion I had was about the server part. It wasn't necessarily about the request part, but it's good that
Okay.
you bring it up because I will check this back with Banshee and maybe Michael and so on. Because that's a good point. It could be interesting because we do have a span which is called the graphical server operation execution, which essentially talks about the execution of it. So I have to verify with the spec what the right terminology here is. Because it could be that the spec actually talks about graphical server requests and talks about graphical server operations as the execution of the operation in the request, but I have to check.
Mhm.
Yeah. I was doing internal RFCs for error handling, and like I wanted to know the exact terminology of if the error happens outside of the query execution, what do I call that? And like they mention request.
Yeah,
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 that's the part I want to focus, by the way. I can clarify that, Pascal, in the comment. I'm not debating server. I
oh,
think
no,
server,
you're right. You're
yeah.
right. You're right. Everything inside of the actual execution is called field, for example, field errors. Everything outside would be a request error. That means validation, operation compilation, and so
Yeah.
on. So that's
Yeah, that's what I thought. Like a type error is a request error. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Let's pick this up. I will keep these ones open. And then in the what is this? Graphical server operation span, where we talk about the execution, actually not the execution, but we talk about the root span of a graphical operation. I did mention a few things about cardinality and persistent queries. And um, you added some comments here, which I understand why or what you want to achieve here. For example, four operation domains with bounded continuity instead of four persistent operation with a specified operation name. Um, just to understand this correctly, what you want to do is you want to essentially say that the cardinality of this span shouldn't necessarily be bound to just persistent queries, because there are other domains where the cardinality of the operation names is also low enough to include it into the trace.
That's correct. Yes. If someone has a strictly internal GraphQL system, a whole system is internal, and only internal teams create queries, and they know that they create at the speed of developers creating new queries, they can enable this and they can get visibility. They don't necessarily have to adopt persisted queries to be recommended to use this. It's still valuable for them. Does it make sense, Pascal? Yeah.
It does, kind of. So the reason why I'm a bit on the fence about this is um, for operation domains with bounded cardinality, for persist operation or internal graphical APIs.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what I
Uh,
mean. Yeah.
the I'm a bit on the fence because people think that they have an internal graphical API while they do not. So that would actually, the only case where this would be valid is if it's completely shut off from the public, so no access to it. And also, um, you have to trust all your teams, everyone which has access to this graphical API has to be trusted. Because without persistent operations, the operation name is passed in from the outside.
Mhm.
So that's a bit a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, my experience, like personally working with GraphQL and working with customers, is that 70% of customers always only use GraphQL internally. They don't expose to the world. They think GraphQL is new. So most people I talk to, they do create them all internally. I understand, of course, that like someone can just dynamically create them internally still. The majority of users I've seen are not using persistent queries, but are using strictly internal APIs, and they keep asking me for good names for their spans. But
Yeah.
like all I'm saying here is like uh, first just clarify. I don't disagree at all with your statement that um, only use this if you know it's not going to expose your system. Like there's no discussion about that. I just want people that like when they're my goal was like if people are reading this and they're like, oh, I'm not using persistent queries, I should enable this. That's not actually true. It's
Yeah.
yeah. I'm happy to rephrase and redocument this, but yeah.
No, I do. I mean, I also agree with you that if you were in full control, then it's probably fine. The only worry I have is that people think they're safe too quick. Because the moment that you expose your API, you have cardinality attack potential. But I mean, the moment you expose anything to the internet, you have. So
I 100% agree that like if they do a small mistake, expose their observability system.
yeah, okay. I will get back to this.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm fine with this. I may rephrase this sentence a bit to make
Perfect.
more put a bit more emphasis on persistent operation. Like maybe even say that like yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest,
Just
like
making sure that it's written in a way that says that if you have a public API, use persistent operations or completely block off everything.
yeah, that's fair. Do you think Pascal they will have to specify because I know some frameworks allow you to create automatic persistent operations, right? Dynamic on the fly.
Yeah, that's the worst kind of persistent operations. The problem there is that you actually so initially the how persist operations in the very beginning, and this was probably a bit a mistake on our side, was advertised is you save in transport. So automated persistent query essentially means that you push a query from the client to the
Mhm.
backend, you get back an ID, you use this ID to make a request the second time. So you always push your queries. Everyone can push queries, then you store the queries, you have the ID. Now, the problem with automated persistent queries is that it doesn't solve the security issue because everyone can push the queries. And in the beginning, I think it could even be that the initial idea was to make a performance optimization, but in the meantime, like persistent operations are really considered the security feature that GraphQL has. Um, and that's a bit the problem with automated persistent queries because you can execute anything you want, and the only thing that you save is the IDs,
Do you think
the
someone
transport
reading,
the transport cost.
yeah, do you think someone reading our mentions here of persistent query in the spec, they would think I'm using automatic persistent queries, which are persistent queries, which
Mm.
means I can use these fields or these fields, or do you think someone knows that like this is probably not the one we're talking about?
It's a good point. I will.
Pascal, how I'm not familiar with that part. How would you secure the cardinality of persistent queries? Are users only allowed to, like maybe there's a maximum count of queries, or is someone pushing those queries first and then clients are only allowed to use those?
Yes, so these are integrated into your graphical client that use a
Okay.
Fuse Vertical or Apollo client or whatever. What they do is they when you ship when your build pipeline runs, it creates a persistent query manifest, which is a
Okay.
JSON with ID to value to query string. And this file is at release. So when you publish your app on the web or when you publish it to an app store or whatever, is
Mm,
uploaded to a registry which keeps track of the key values. And
okay.
backend is connected to this. And it's really about there's no other queries executed other than the ones
Okay.
that you trust. That's, by the way, one of the problems, or like most of the companies which have a public graphical API have an internal
Yeah.
graphical API. and they use the internal graphical API for their apps with persisted operations. And they're very, very careful, or should be, about the public graphical API because that's a different beast. It's very, very hard to get this right.
So
Because,
the server team is greenlighting that manifest.
yes.
So I think we could summarize almost this. It's not about persisted or not, or internal or not. It's mostly about the GraphQL API owner is responsible for the cardinality. Because if you're exposing persisted and you allow anyone to create, then you're not in control. You're not in control of the boundary, how many persisted queries are allowed. So it's really about this. If the service, like if we would make a comparison with REST, when you create a REST API, the application routes you're in control of because you've deployed the app. Here, we're not really in control, but if you're using persisted and you actually greenlight those, you're in control of those routes, of the amount of routes that you allow. So here it would be, I'm not saying it's easier to explain, but the common point is that it brings back control into the hands of the API implementers about that count. That
Yeah, that's a good input. I think we can iterate on this a bit. We can rephrase this and make sure that I think we should explicitly mention trusted documents slash persistent operations slash persistent queries, however we want to call it. We should also mention what Marcus said before with the exclusion of, like, if you use automatic persistent queries, you're not safe, even though that they sound very similar. And then like how we phrase this with the bounded cardinality and so on, that's fine. But that needs a bit of work. I think we are in agreement what we want to achieve with it. It's just about phrasing it correctly.
Yeah, it's like if you're not 100% sure about the boundary, then don't use it.
Yeah,
it's almost like that.
Yeah, I would say Pascal, if you want to give it a shot, just the slight change of language, let's just take another review and see what it looks like. But we're all in agreement what we should be just
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Okay, then we
Nice.
have a few, hi Ali, we have a few simple ones. We have the parsing span and we have the validation span. And I've just added all of the attributes which we had in the spans above also to these spans so that you can actually co-locate them. I know that not all of the observability system support this, but some do, that you can actually query for spans based on attribute values and so on. So this is going to be quite useful for them.
Did you, my only question for these Pascal is, did you choose the ones, of course, some of them are like trivial, like the name and type, but did you choose the ID or other things based on experience working with this, or was just more like you're working just with the spec in general?
So we work with, we already do open telemetry with Hot Chocolate, and we have our activity enricher, our open telemetry integration, which essentially already makes use of some of these. Although with the discussion that we had, it's also time to clean this up a bit. And what we have is we also have a telemetry ingest, which accepts open telemetry. And what we want to achieve with this essentially is the harmonization, so that you don't have to have completely different backends for different servers, right? So there's some, like a few of these we already have. We have way more attributes which are very specific to Hot Chocolate. And that's I think the bare bone of what we need. So you need to know what type it is. So it's a query mutation or subscription. You need to know the operation name because only the operation name and the hash or the graphical operation ID is uniquely identifiable. So
Mhm.
I would say this is the bare minimum. We could add more, like was this a persistent operation or not and whatnot. But I think that most, as we discussed this a few weeks ago, the the most of the attributes that we have are statically analyzable. And there's
Mhm.
no point in sending them always to a telemetry system. Like this field is
Mm.
deprecated. Well, fair enough. You can tell me this once. You don't have to tell me this 5 million times, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this really is required to uniquely identify what actually was executed.
Yeah, sounds good. I just so I know the operation name is the selected operation name in this case.
Okay, so in a graphical document, you can have multiple
Yeah.
operations.
Yeah.
And that's just what the user has passed in. But again, like there needs to be a bit of sanity checking here. If the user passes in a graphical operation name, which is not part of the document, then, oh,
This is parsing. Yeah.
good point. You are right. That's not correct. This has to go.
Yeah, just because it's early, right? It's parsing. We don't know yet. Yeah.
Mm.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine because it's a tag. It's an attribute. So there's no cardinality issues with the attributes, right? Like it's
That's
not a span name which has to be low cardinality. The values of attributes can have high cardinality.
yeah.
So actually it's fine. So we can keep it in.
So yeah, go ahead.
It would be a problem if we would include it into the span name, which would be low cardinality. Because at this point, before you parse, you don't know if this is an operation name which is inside of this document, right?
Yeah.
Only after
So,
validation, you know.
so if they pass a document with multiple queries, oh no, never mind. Never mind. It's fine.
Yeah, so most
Speak
graphical. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
just speaking of documents, earlier you mentioned GraphQL over HTTP. I am a bit puzzled by the dot operation dot ID as well. So isn't it called document ID in the other spec? The persisted document ID? Because GraphQL operation document ID would work. Because whenever I noticed that because sorry for interrupting, but whenever you were mentioning it, you were saying document ID naturally.
ID.
Or no, it isn't there. Isn't it in a separate one in the persisted? There's a separate RFC.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about the RFC because you see it's about the ID which is passed in via the request. So
Oh, okay.
I'm
Okay, okay.
wondering, I'm wondering what this is. I agree that there's a persistent document ID, which is the ID of the persistent document. But what we want to trace is this one, right? So I'm not like,
But that's a variable, right? That's the
yeah, I'm pretty sure that this is probably not, yeah, this is not going to be really messy because ID is really, really
yeah,
generic.
it's everywhere.
I don't think that it is in here.
So to be clear, it's the ID of the persisted document or it's another ID?
It's the I it could be the ID of the persistent document.
Uh-huh.
It's the ID which was in the request because it's separate. It's requested separately, right? You send the ID, the query, and the variables in the post request. So
Yeah,
it's a
okay, okay.
persistent ID. The question is what's this ID called? Because if we want to use the persistent operation ID, we need another tag that identifies what the user has sent because these two could mismatch for whatever reason, right?
Oh, right. Okay. Okay, okay.
In our
Yeah.
context,
So
isn't the ID we want always? Are we talking about the persistent ID? Like you said, I don't think there's like a canonical ID, right?
No, but when you look at a graphical, so this is a graphical post request, right? You have the query
Yeah.
and you have the variables, but
Yeah.
you also provide the ID in here, and I'm searching for where what's that? Persisted. It's not mentioned in here. Yeah, let's. I need to do some research on this. How this is called, but it's really about the ID that you pass in via your post request.
I think I found it. I found the other one that I was thinking about.
Can you share the link?
It's in the Zoom chat.
Document ID. Okay.
Yeah,
That's for persisted operations. You're right.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, let's see.
So maybe still it's a sign that we get confused about ID being so generic. We might have to find something more descriptive if possible.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if. Yeah, let's see. Let's see.
Yeah.
I need to verify this. If this is called document ID, then we can always rename the attribute. I'm fine with that.
Sure.
But it's really about what you send with your post request. That should be the main.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. That's why we
Sure.
have meetings. That's exactly what these meetings are for. Where have we been? We were here. Okay. Let's close this and move you guys over here. Yeah, so we have parsing, validation, variable recursion. That's basically the same that's described in the graphical specification as well. And then we have the operation execution. If we go with graphical server request, we can probably remove the operation here because that's about the operation execution then. I will also touch base with the others about this. And then we have the higher up, we have the field execution. And here we said that most likely what makes the most sense is to have the coordinate. Generally, the path probably would be more useful, but you have high cardinality here. So if we go low cardinality and just add the path as a tag, I think we should be fine. Because you see the path is not here, which is wrong. Ah, no, it's there. Graphical selection path. It's there. It's very good.
Yeah, I think that's a good span name. Because it's bound to cardinality. It's based on the internal types. I think it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean you can still have too many of these, but in this we specifically write that use one of those. So either manually specify which resolvers you want to trace, use async resolvers only. That's, for example, what we do because we have async await in C#. We know what methods are async. We assume these methods take longer. That's what we trace. Depth-based filtering and performance-based filtering, although that's a bit tricky because that's not really stable. You can also start a trace and then throw it away when it's executed quick enough. Okay. Good. Then we have first pull request through. And then we have trace for data loaders. That's quite simple. This just adds one additional span type for executing batches. That's quite useful to have in your tracing as well. And I just assume that all data loaders have some kind of name. Could just be your user data loader, or if you have generic, whatever data loader generic name. And it probably makes sense to also add this to the span name because that should be low cardinality enough. so that we can say graphical data loader batch, data loader name, and then it's very easy to discover what was executed. I've added the batch size here because that's always nice to see if you have two data loader batches which run after each other or don't run consistently batched, then you still have like the batch size that you can determine, okay, for whatever reason, only 5 were dispatched in the first one and 15 in the second one. But it's highly dependent on implementation.
For that kind of value, would you recommend bucketing it? Like, I guess, no, like if you had a batch size of like 0 to 10,000, if you had a unique value for each one, it could add up. So I don't know how specific you want to be about the nature of the value, but
I think if we talk about metrics later this year, because after tracing, we most likely, once we have the errors done, we'll start working on metrics, because logs do not make much sense with graphical, obviously. In case of metrics, this probably is just a histogram, right? So you see how the distribution is of the values. But for a tag, I think a tag essentially is just an identifier for identifiable value, right? Instead of just arbitrary data. Like, you know that there is a value data loader batch size, and this can have any value. It can be 1, 2, 1,000,000.
okay. Yeah, I think for me, my concern is just like how it ends up being used. So if it's like your size is your histogram, then it's fine. But if the value is a tag on something, then that tag has, like, at least in like the stats roll up side, like there's each unique tag or label is split out. So then you kind of have an explosion of. So
yeah, but you wouldn't aggregate your spans based on tags, right? Because otherwise you have many cardinality issues.
okay, I'm happy to leave the topic there. It's just something I've seen as a word of caution in the past.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's something we have to know, of course. If I don't know, like Marco, when you ingest data into Datadog, you don't automatically create meters for all of the permutation of tags, right?
That's correct that you don't automatically do it. But if you show me this, I would say send the raw value, because you always have the option. That's might be vendor specific. You always have the option to have the raw value and put in a histogram in a full time series, and you can do whatever you want with it. There's no problem with cardinality at that point. But like I said, I don't know if everyone has this capability.
Like, the only thing that shows up to me with this is that you don't necessarily know what your data loader size is going to be when it initially runs, right? So like after the request completes, if you hit that data loader again, wouldn't it return the already fetched value and not go make another request? Like, if your timing happens to be right after it finished?
Well, I would say it depends.
Yeah.
Maybe the description here is not clear enough. I think if you have two resolvers, which hit the same data loader, you have batch size 2, you only have one graphical server data loader batch span. You don't
Right.
have two.
Absolutely.
So
yeah. But
right.
my thought here is if we have two resolvers, right, that hit it, we have a batch size of 2. Absolutely. If a child resolver of that happens to also hit it, now we have a batch size of 3, but that third request was not run in parallel, right? Because it's going to wait for the parent resolver to resolve before it hits the data loader. And now our number 2 is not necessarily accurate, but that actually happened after the span maybe was closed for the data loader, right?
I would say this is probably just as I would say this is execution based. So when we think about data loaders and we say that let's give me these two IDs, then we do data loader batch size equals 2. And if then a child resolver calls the data loader with a new ID, which it doesn't know, then we will do another data loader batch and the batch size will be 1. So I think like everything which is resolved from the cache of the data loader shouldn't be part of a data loader batch span. I just think that the data loader batch is the execution because that essentially wraps the data loader, the database call and so on. Because otherwise you have
Right.
really random database
Yeah.
call in your queries.
Yeah. No, I totally agree on the span part itself. I'm just saying in terms of counting the batch size, right? That would only take into account the number of calls that happened to the data loader while the data loader was actually loading the data before it returned the first result, right? And so it might be misleading and not capture the number that we're actually looking for,
Well,
which is how many requests.
I'm just thinking about our data loader implementations now, and we have an array of keys which we pass along. And what the data loader batch size is for me is the length of this array. And if you have 2 values, it's 2. And if you have another one which only fetches 1 value, it's going to be 1.
Okay.
So it's really about how many the information here is how many IDs did I put into my Postgres query? Because if this is 1 1 1 1 1, then you've done something wrong. But if this is 5 and then you see another resolver execution and you see another 5, then you know it's actually batching correctly.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So I think, I was misinterpreting it as how many callers were there as opposed to how many pieces of data does this data loader load.
Right.
Okay.
Right. That could be another metric which might be interesting. Yeah. I also don't know how we would track this in our implementation, because the only thing, like, we just have a promise, a task that we return, and if 2 resolvers request the same ID, they will get exactly the same instance of this promise back. And to now start counting there, that would be terrible.
Totally right. Yeah. Totally right. Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a question about this. Sorry if I'm off the mark. Tell me if I'm off the mark. But does the data loader sometimes handles caching in a sense that you could request 100 records from it and it just returns like that because they're all cached, or that's not a concern?
Yes, but only during a request. So when you do a graphical request, data loaders are used for 2 things. So one thing is to avoid an n+1 query. So let's say you have a resolver on type user which resolves their, okay, that's a bad example. Let's say you have a list of products, and on products you have a field called category. And now you do a database request there. If you load the list of products, then you would have number of list items, database queries to the database. Now with the data loader, these are batched together. So you have one fetch for the products and another fetch for the categories. That's one thing that the data loader does. But the other thing is that the data loader guarantees you that for one ID, you will have consistently the same result during your request execution. So when you have a huge tree, which you shouldn't have, but if you have a huge tree and you fetch an ID up here, and then you go through the tree, the data loader guarantees you that the user ID that you fetched up here yields the same user down here, even if the user has changed in the database, because you keep the thing in memory. So that's the two use cases. There has been experimentation about using data loader caches across requests, but that's usually a different pattern.
Yeah. So within the same request, if you load a bunch of users here on top, but then you are forced to load other fields, so like close that data loader, And then let's say you load those same group of fields again later in the request. Uh, so they would, like you said, you guarantee that they return the same because I request the same users. Does it also means that the data loader could just execute immediately because it saved that information? What I'm saying is like you have two calls for the same data loader, same fields, number
Ex-
5, but one is immediate, the other one goes to database. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I mentioned before about the serving from cache. Um, if you serve a value that you already have to a resolver or to the whatever has requested it, that shouldn't cause any span because that's essentially already a completed value. If we would start introducing the data loader spans there, then depending on how you architecture your application, you will have millions of spans. Well, it's a bit over the top, but you will have
Yeah.
hundreds of spans in a request. Because what we do often when we implement stuff, or that's just a really nice pattern, is that when you have when you have a resolver that has to load data and verify a few things. For example, it first loads, I don't know, the document, and then it loads the workspace. Then it has to check if the user has access to this document, which is part of the workspace. So these trees, if you think about it from an implementation perspective, they just look like sequential calls. So sequential calls to the database. So first call loads the document, second call loads the workspace, third call loads the organization, and then you verify that the user's in the organization. That looks like a sequential call, which would be terrible. But you only do this once. And all of your resolvers, which are on the edges, then just use the cached values. So each connection between two types, if it's a complex one, for example, from user to from product to category, validates everything that it has to validate, and it's super quick because it's already in memory. So
Mhm.
that's serving from cache. If you already have the value, then we just hand it out.
I see. In that case, the cache is handled by the GraphQL server, like implementation, not by that doesn't hit the data loaders. It GraphQL does it the resolution, right?
The batch scheduler does, which most likely is controlled by the graphical execution. It doesn't
Okay.
have to, like data loaders also work in REST controllers. They
Yeah.
just are not that useful there because usually you just do a projection into the database directly and then return the detail. But technically, it's fine. It's just the graphical execution engine gives you a way to batch efficiently.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Nice. Okay. Then I've entered in. No, I haven't shown you this, but I have shown it to the other work group. I've also added a pull request for distributed GraphQL, which is not only distributed. Now, I'm not sure, Brian, how GraphQL Spring works in detail, but I know that we could use these spans in Hot Chocolate as well, even when you don't federate your schema. Essentially, it introduces two spans. One is the graphical server operation planning, which says yada yada yada. This is used in federation to do planning, but not only in federation, because it could also be that there is a graphical server which precompiles the queries and caches them so that it doesn't have to do validation, parsing, and all these things at the same every time. And what we do in Hot Chocolate, for example, is we do the validation, we do the parsing, and then we compile the operation. We bring it into a format which is very fast executable. So that could be something that also just a normal graphical server could use without federation.
Okay, I'll bring that up with the GraphQL Java team because in the instrumentation contract that they provide, I don't think that this phase is available right now. So I'll check with them if they're generally interested with that concept.
Yeah, let's see.
Thanks.
And the second thing that's where Rob's eyes light up, it's the operation step execution. I also try to make this generic enough so that it's for one, like Okay, this band covers the execution of a single step in the graphical execution plan, where each step typically represents the resolution of one or more fields that can be executed together. Now, in federated graphical system, a step often corresponds to a query, but not only, right? Each step execution may involve field resolution, data fetching, and so on. This could also be used by things like GraphFast. Because essentially, you don't have resolvers in GraphFast anymore. You also think about, you get a request in, then you compile and you plan the operation, and then you execute steps instead of resolver level. And I think we can actually generalize these concepts, because then the federation is not necessarily a like GraphFast would just work with any telemetry system that also knows federation, right? Yeah. So at the moment I'm implementing these now in our telemetry of Fusion, and I already have a few more things that I want to add as attributes. For once, we have the step ID, which Benji rightly pointed out to be a string instead of an int. But there's more, like graphical operation step type or kind is going to be nice, so that you know what kind of step it was. For example, in Fusion we have 3 or 4 different kinds. In GraphFast you have many more kinds, depending on what nodes you hit. And the same goes for the plan. There should be a plan ID, and there should also be a plan kind, so that you know what kind of plan it is. That's what we have discovered while implementing it.
Sorry, just so I know what you're referring to, is it GraphFast? Like, I'm trying to find what exactly that it is you're talking about.
So it's a project that Benji did from Graphile. And essentially what it is, it's an alternative way to think about execution of GraphQL, because GraphQL has a problem that all graphical servers or most graphical servers execute on a field level, but that has its problems. Benji has a whole talk around it. And what he has introduced essentially is that you think, instead of thinking in resolvers and fields, you think in steps. And instead of doing n+1 database query, you exactly know, based on these steps, what data you need, and you can then create an optimized database query.
Oh, cool. Yeah, thanks. I'll read this about this. Thank you. This seems pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite a cool project. I'm not sure like how he released, I would think a year ago, the first version of it. I haven't looked into it too much because of time problems, but it looks very interesting. It solves a few problems that we also have in hot chocolate. Okay, and it's time. It's time already. Okay, so in 2 weeks, the graphical conf is already over. I will have a talk on Tuesday about the work group, what we do. If you don't mind, I will also mention who's part of it, that you also get a bit of publicity. I'll just mention the contributors to the work group and so on. And we'll talk a bit about what we do and why we do things, what our goals are. Okay, great. Any questions? Fantastic. Okay, then I think the next work group is in October, and we will have to move. Is anyone joining from the US?
I'm joining from the West Coast of Canada, but like West Coast time zone.
West Coast, but you're Canada.
Yeah, it's the same West Coast as the Canadian West Coast. Or US West Coast, sir.
I'm talking about Thanksgiving, because that's on the
I thought you could talk about time.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the
Fine.
27th of November is the Thanksgiving. So if there's a problem, we'll just put it around.
And I'll move it around, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we could. I'd love to be here. Feels like we're getting close to talking about errors.
Yeah, I said that I will
yeah.
shoot. You were not here yet. I will send an email to Trask and ask him if he could ask a few reply to a few questions about errors, or even join the next work group, and then we would dedicate one session just about errors, like how we are gonna do this.
Awesome. Yeah, timely. We've at PayPal we're rethinking GraphQL errors and standards for a new integration that we have. So, you know, be interesting to have a little bit of input, you know, from outside in all that conversation.
Sounds good. If you want, you can make a pull request for the next agenda so that we don't forget, because it's already, you know, a month is a lot of time. You could just add it as an agenda item to the next agenda, and then we'll talk about errors.
Cool. Sounds good to me. Right.
Awesome. In that case, see you in a month.
Good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
See you.